Chapter 1: The Downpour. It began in the year 2023, on an otherwise ordinary day. The world woke up to the drumming of relentless rain, a deluge of epic proportions. Weather forecasts had never predicted this. It was beyond anything science could explain. In coastal cities and states, where the ocean had always been a neighbor, panic rippled through the streets. As the rain pounded with unwavering persistence, roads transformed into rivers, and buildings succumbed to the unrelenting tide. At first, there was hope that this torrential downpour was just a temporary aberration, a quirk of nature. People gathered on balconies, their faces etched with a mix of wonder and apprehension as they watched the ceaseless rain. Phones buzzed with messages from loved ones, and the internet was flooded with images and videos of the watery chaos. Social media hashtags like #EndlessDownpour and #RainPocalypse trended worldwide, but in the end, these digital cries for help were nothing but words typed in despair. Days turned into weeks, and still, the rain persisted. It showed no sign of mercy. Those who had once enjoyed the scenic views of coastal life were now submerged, forced to seek refuge on higher ground. Coastal towns and cities had become submerged ghost towns, lost to the relentless downpour. People's lives became centered around the quest for higher ground and survival. Hillsides and mountainous regions that had once been the backdrop of serene landscapes became the battlegrounds of hope. There was an unspoken understanding that, in this watery apocalypse, the mountains were the last refuge. In the early days, these mountain sanctuaries offered a glimmer of hope. Communities formed, makeshift shelters rose on the hillsides, and people shared what little they had. Humanity's better nature emerged, and tales of heroism and compassion trickled in. They stuck together as the rain poured down, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Chapter 2: The Mountain Refuge. In the shadow of ceaseless rain, the mountains became the last sanctuary for those who had escaped the deluge of the coastal cities. Families, the elderly, and the young sought solace on these rugged terrains, where the rising waters couldn't reach. Hope and despair mingled in their hearts, for while they had escaped the watery doom below, a new kind of peril loomed. Communities began to form on the mountainsides, resembling villages of old. These makeshift settlements were united by the shared determination to endure. Tents and huts sprang up amid the rough terrain, offering a fragile semblance of home. The true luxury here was safety from the ever-persistent downpour. The rain, never-ending and unyielding, dictated life on the mountains. It seeped into every crevice and every thought. The hum of the rain was a constant companion, sometimes a soothing lullaby, other times a maddening presence that chipped away at people's sanity. Water was both a savior and a curse. On one hand, it provided sustenance, and the fresh mountain streams offered clean drinking water. On the other, it was a reminder of the cataclysm below, a reminder that this ceaseless rain showed no signs of relenting. People forged a sense of community in this adversity, their bonds growing stronger with each passing day. Those who once had been strangers now depended on each other for their very survival. Food, meager as it was shared among them, and tents offered shelter to the weary. United by their dire circumstances, the people helped each other, their acts of kindness beacons of light in the gloom. The most resilient souls emerged as leaders in these mountain refuges. They organized food distribution and shared knowledge on how to collect rainwater. They offered a glimmer of hope amid the endless gray skies. But even in this mountain haven, the human spirit was tested. As the weeks turned into months and the incessant rain showed no sign of subsiding, the initial sense of unity began to fracture. The mountainous refuge had provided a reprieve, but space was finite, and the resources were limited. A sense of scarcity crept into people's hearts. In this time of desperation, some took to hoarding food and water, putting their own needs above the community's. Leaders found themselves having to make tough decisions about rationing, and the people's trust waned as they struggled to survive. Survival had become the name of the game, and to some, that meant ensuring their own safety at any cost. In the ceaseless downpour, the darker aspects of human nature began to surface. It was a harsh reminder that while the endless rain had united them in their suffering, it couldn't wash away the complexity of human beings. Chapter 3: Crowded Slopes. The ceaseless rain had stretched on for months, and as time wore on, the mountain refuge had grown increasingly crowded. What had once been a gathering of a few survivors had become a bustling community of hundreds, then thousands. It was as if the entire world had sought solace in the elevated sanctuary of the mountains. As the population swelled, the once open slopes became covered in an intricate web of tents and shanties. The rugged terrain was now a patchwork of shelters that clung to the slopes like barnacles on a ship's hull. Each day, more people arrived, seeking refuge from the relentless rain below. With overcrowding came challenges. Food, once shared generously, became scarcer. Freshwater streams were strained to provide for so many. The unity that had once defined the mountain refuge was beginning to fray. Leaders who had emerged early in the refuge's history struggled to maintain control. Rationing had become a necessity, but deciding who received what was a painful ordeal. Families were torn apart, with some members sent away to find resources and others remaining behind. The ceaseless rain weighed heavily on the people. The familiar rhythm of the downpour had become a constant backdrop to their lives, an ever-present reminder of the cataclysmic world that lay below. It was as if the rain had become a living entity, a malevolent force that sought to wear down their spirits. The community on the mountains was no longer a single, united front. It had become a microcosm of society, with factions forming based on alliances, resources, and loyalties. Squabbles over limited supplies were not uncommon, and what had once been acts of kindness were now driven by necessity rather than goodwill. Despite the hardships, there remained a resilient core within the community, individuals who continued to look out for one another, no matter the circumstances. Their acts of kindness, in the face of adversity, were lights of hope in the gloom. They were the glue that held the fragile society together, even as it threatened to unravel. The ceaseless rain showed no signs of relenting, and the world below remained submerged. Each passing day was a reminder of the lost cities and homes, but it was also a testament to the human spirit's capacity to adapt and survive. The mountain refuge had become a place of both despair and hope, a symbol of humanity's endurance in the face of an unending storm. Chapter 4: The First Conflict. The mountain refuge, once a place of relative peace and unity, was now marked by the tension of overcrowding and resource scarcity. As the ceaseless rain showed no mercy, the cracks in the community's foundation grew deeper, and it was only a matter of time before the first major conflict erupted. The catalyst was a dwindling food supply. Rationing had been in effect for some time, and those who had access to extra rations had become the de facto elites of the refuge. This growing disparity led to whispers of dissent in the crowded tents and shanties. One fateful day, a fight broke out over a meager portion of bread. Tempers flared, and what began as a heated exchange of words quickly escalated into a physical brawl. It was the first conflict of its kind in the refuge, but it would not be the last. The community was divided. Some believed in a more egalitarian approach, while others thought that those who had hoarded resources should have the right to do so. The mountain refuge, once marked by cooperation and shared sacrifice, had become a breeding ground for resentment and division. Leaders who had emerged early in the refuge's history were struggling to keep control. They recognized the need for a more structured system for resource distribution, but couldn't agree on the specifics. As they debated and tried to find a solution, the people grew increasingly restless. With each passing day, the atmosphere in the refuge became more tense, like a storm brewing on the horizon. The ceaseless rain seemed to mirror the growing discord among the survivors. Some members of the community argued for a strict, authoritarian rule, believing that it was the only way to maintain order. Others clung to the ideals of democracy and cooperation, asserting that these values were the heart of their refuge. As the conflict reached a boiling point, a meeting was called, and the entire community gathered on the slopes. It was a somber and anxious assembly. The leaders presented their proposed solutions, but the crowd remained divided. In the end, compromise prevailed. A new system was established, one that aimed to ensure fair distribution of resources while maintaining the principles of cooperation and shared sacrifice that had defined the refuge from the beginning. It was a fragile truce, and it remained to be seen whether it could truly unify the divided community. The first conflict was a stark reminder of the pressures that overcrowding and resource scarcity had placed on the mountain refuge. It was a turning point in the community's history, testing the very ideals that had brought the survivors together in the first place. The ceaseless rain continued to fall, a constant presence in their lives, as they grappled with the challenges of their new reality. Chapter 5: Tribes of Survival. The resolution of the first major conflict had brought a fragile peace to the mountain refuge, but it also marked the beginning of a significant shift in the community. As the population continued to grow, the idea of a united refuge began to fade. Instead, smaller groups, or tribes, began forming, each with its own distinct leader and set of rules. Resource distribution had become more structured, but it had also resulted in these tribal divisions. Each tribe now had its share of the refuge's stockpile, and members often viewed outsiders with suspicion. Cooperation across tribes became more challenging, and the spirit of unity that had initially defined the refuge seemed like a distant memory. The tribes developed unique identities and ways of life. Some were focused on farming the limited arable land available, growing crops like potatoes and beans. Others became expert hunters, venturing further up the mountain in search of game to supplement their diet. A few specialized in crafting and were known for their ability to repair clothing and create makeshift shelters. As time passed, the tribe's leaders became influential figures within the refuge. They were responsible for distributing resources among their members, maintaining order, and making important decisions on behalf of their tribe. The challenges of leadership were considerable, as they had to balance the needs of their people with the limited resources available. The population's growth showed no signs of slowing, despite the crowded living conditions. Many families welcomed new additions, and this constant influx of newcomers put additional strain on the already limited resources. The tribes, while providing a sense of identity and security for their members, also created competition for these resources. In this fragmented landscape, the ceaseless rain remained a relentless force. It hammered the refuge, eroding the spirits of the inhabitants, who now lived with the constant stress of scarcity and uncertainty. As the endless downpour continued, it seemed to reflect the increasingly fragmented and turbulent nature of the once unified refuge. Within each tribe, a sense of loyalty and camaraderie persisted. The members supported one another in their daily struggles, and their leaders sought to create a sense of cohesion. But the larger refuge was divided into separate entities, each one battling the harsh conditions and societal divisions in its own way. Despite the challenges, the refugees clung to the hope that the ceaseless rain would eventually subside, that they could reclaim the unity and cooperation they had once shared. It was a hope that was tested daily in the face of a world transformed by torrents of rain and the complex web of survival tribes. The mountain refuge, once a symbol of unity and resilience, had evolved into a collection of interconnected yet divided tribes, all striving to endure the ceaseless downpour and maintain a fragile sense of hope. Theirs was a world of stark realities, where the bonds of family and tribe were essential for survival in the relentless storm. Chapter 6: The Struggle for Resources. The ceaseless rain continued its unrelenting assault on the mountain refuge. With each passing day, the importance of resources became even more pronounced. The tribes, once a source of unity and support, now found themselves in a relentless struggle for survival. As the population swelled, the demand for resources grew exponentially. The limited supplies of food, clean water, and warm clothing were stretched to their limits. The fertile patches of land were fiercely contested, and the hunting grounds became battlegrounds for the different tribes. Within each tribe, leaders grappled with the difficult choices of resource allocation. They sought to ensure the well-being of their people while being mindful of the finite resources available. These decisions were a constant source of tension and often led to disputes among tribe members. Scarcity bred desperation, and instances of resource hoarding became more frequent. Accusations of theft and sabotage strained the already fragile relationships between tribes. It was no longer enough to rely on the unity that had defined the early days of the refuge. It was every tribe for itself. The communal spirit that once bound the mountain dwellers together was eroding, replaced by an atmosphere of competition and mistrust. Individuals and tribes fought not only against the elements, but also against each other. It was a stark departure from the sense of community that had initially sustained them. The tribe leaders struggled to maintain their people's loyalty and obedience as dissent grew. As they contemplated the challenging decisions they faced daily, they felt the weight of their leadership more heavily than ever. Maintaining order within their respective tribes had become an arduous task. The ceaseless rain, with its ceaseless beat upon the refuge, echoed the relentless struggle for resources. Its rhythm seemed to underscore the intensity of the tribe's daily battles. While some leaders remained committed to cooperation and peaceful negotiation, others resorted to more authoritarian methods to secure what their tribes needed. It was during these tumultuous days that the mountain refuge witnessed a series of conflicts among the tribes. Altercations over resource disputes escalated into physical confrontations, and the bonds of trust that had once united these survivors began to unravel. But in the midst of these challenges, there were those who still held on to the hope that unity could prevail. A group of individuals from different tribes, who remembered the early days when the ceaseless rain had driven them to seek refuge together, decided to take matters into their own hands. They set out on a perilous journey to find a solution to the resource crisis. Their quest would take them deeper into the treacherous mountains, where they would face both natural and human obstacles. As the rain continued to fall, the fate of the mountain refuge hung in the balance, teetering between unity and discord, hope and despair. Chapter 7: The Fading Hope. As the days turned into weeks, the mountain refuge found itself trapped in a seemingly never-ending downpour. The ceaseless rain, a relentless tormentor, showed no signs of abating, and its unyielding nature mirrored the growing desperation of the mountain dwellers. The dwindling resources and escalating conflicts had taken a toll on everyone. The refuge that had once symbolized safety and unity had transformed into a crucible of despair. Fear and hopelessness hung in the air like a heavy fog, obscuring any remnants of optimism. The initial resolve of the tribes began to wane. The leaders, who had once held their people together with promises of a brighter future, now faced a weary and disheartened populace. The ceaseless rain had eroded not only the landscape but also the collective spirit. Families huddled in their makeshift shelters, holding on to one another for warmth and solace. The children, who had once played with the hope of brighter days ahead, now knew only the persistent chill of the mountains and the pangs of hunger. Their laughter had been replaced by muted sobs. Among the tribes, there were those who yearned for the days when cooperation and camaraderie had reigned. They longed for a return to the unity that had first brought them together in the face of nature's fury. But their voices were a mere whisper in the howling wind, drowned out by the cries of despair and the clashing interests of the tribes. Even the group that had set out on the perilous journey to find a solution found their faith dwindling. The rain had become a relentless adversary, making progress through the unforgiving terrain nearly impossible. Their initial hope for a resolution now seemed like a distant dream. Despite the growing sense of hopelessness, there were those who still clung to the belief that humanity's better nature would prevail. They reminded the tribes of the initial days when survival had depended on cooperation and shared resources. Their voices served as a beacon of hope, no matter how dim. In the darkest hours, when the ceaseless rain pounded relentlessly on the refuge, the people of the mountains found solace in the faint glimmers of unity that persisted. Small acts of kindness, like sharing meager meals or offering a warm embrace, reminded them of their shared humanity. It was a time of reckoning for the mountain dwellers. The ceaseless rain had tested their mettle, revealing the depths of both their compassion and their capacity for discord. In the shadow of fading hope, they stood at a crossroads, uncertain of whether they would succumb to the ceaseless rain or rise above it with renewed unity and determination. The days and nights blurred into an indistinct continuum of ceaseless rain, challenging the very fabric of the mountain refuge. The people's fate hung in the balance, suspended between the oppressive weight of despair and the flickering ember of hope. Chapter 8: The Isolated Few. In the heart of the mountain refuge, the majority of the survivors had embraced the hope rekindled by the successful cave expedition. Newfound resources, shelter, and camaraderie became their pillars of strength. However, not everyone was willing to let go of the past grievances or share in the newfound optimism. A small group of individuals, led by a charismatic but opportunistic figure named Victor, had chosen a different path. They believed that relying on the resources of the caves would lead to the overexploitation of their newfound sanctuary. Instead, Victor and his followers insisted on maintaining their isolation from the other tribes, hoarding whatever limited resources they could lay their hands on. They had selected an isolated section of the cave system, deeper and more treacherous than the rest. This isolation came at a steep cost. Their existence became a constant struggle. The ceaseless rain was still a part of their daily lives, and their defiance took the form of hoarding and secrecy. Victor, though initially admired for his charisma and leadership, had become increasingly authoritarian. He enforced strict rationing and severely limited interaction with other survivors. His ideology was that, by isolating themselves and preserving their meager resources, his followers could outlast the ceaseless rain. The rift between Victor's faction and the rest of the refuge grew wider with each passing day. Tensions flared, and verbal clashes escalated into physical confrontations. The majority in the refuge saw Victor's group as a hindrance to their collective survival, a festering wound that needed to be addressed. The council convened once more to address this divisive issue. Sophia, who had been instrumental in discovering the caves, stood up and passionately argued for unity among the survivors. She spoke of the need to find common ground, emphasizing that isolation would only lead to further suffering and division. Her words resonated with many of the council members who had witnessed the positive outcomes of their earlier decisions, such as the cave expedition. The council ultimately decided to send an envoy to speak with Victor and his followers, in the hope of reaching an understanding and bringing an end to the internal strife. As the envoy entered the depths of the isolated caves, they were met with a mixed reception from Victor's followers. Some were eager to reconcile and rejoin the wider refuge, while others remained steadfast in their belief in isolation. Victor, however, was resistant to any negotiations. He argued that the resources they had preserved were too precious to share with others, even if it meant remaining isolated. The negotiations became a battle of wills as the envoy tried to reason with him. Days turned into weeks, and the ceaseless rain continued its relentless fall outside the cave. Tensions within the isolated group grew, mirroring the escalating hostility in the wider refuge. The council members remained hopeful that a peaceful resolution could be reached, but their patience wore thin as the standoff persisted. The fate of the isolated few and their unwilling leader remained uncertain, casting a shadow over the mountain refuge. While the majority sought unity and collective survival, a small faction clung to the belief that isolation was their only path to outlasting the ceaseless rain. In the midst of these internal struggles, the ceaseless rain continued to pour, serving as a reminder of the challenges that still lay ahead. The refuge was at a crossroads, and the outcome of this internal conflict would shape their collective destiny as they faced the ceaseless rain together. Chapter 9: The Turning Point. As the internal conflict within the mountain refuge continued to escalate, the ceaseless rain outside showed no signs of relenting. The situation had reached a breaking point, and the majority of the survivors were growing increasingly frustrated with the isolated faction led by Victor. It became clear to the council and the majority of the refugees that they could not afford to let the situation persist any longer. Their focus had always been on survival and unity, and Victor's faction was threatening the fragile harmony they had managed to establish. The envoy sent to negotiate with Victor had reported back to the council, detailing the stubbornness and uncompromising nature of Victor's leadership. It had become evident that unless a drastic change occurred, the rift within the refuge would only deepen. Sophia, who had become a symbol of unity and hope within the community, once again stepped forward. She believed that there was a way to reach an agreement with Victor's faction without resorting to force or division. Sophia had spent time observing Victor's followers and understood the motivations behind their isolationist stance. She proposed a plan to the council. Instead of trying to force Victor's group to rejoin the wider community, she suggested that they offer to share knowledge. Sophia believed that, by demonstrating the benefits of unity and cooperation, they could slowly persuade Victor's faction to integrate once more. The council embraced Sophia's plan as a final, peaceful attempt to bridge the divide. An envoy consisting of diplomats, educators, and skilled artisans was selected to bring the proposal to Victor. They carried with them gifts of knowledge, including the secrets of agriculture in the cave environment, improved water purification techniques, and plans for expanding the community's living spaces. When the envoy reached the isolated section of the caves, they were met with skepticism and caution from Victor's followers. However, the offering of knowledge and the genuine desire for reconciliation began to soften some hearts. Slowly, discussions unfolded, and the members of Victor's faction began to realize that their isolation was unsustainable in the long run. Victor, too, started to see the potential benefits of reintegration. He had been a stubborn leader, but he couldn't ignore the potential advantages of working together. The ceaseless rain showed no signs of abating, and their resources were limited. Alone, they might not survive, but as part of the wider refuge, they had a better chance. After days of negotiation and persuasion, a historic agreement was reached. Victor and his followers agreed to rejoin the main body of the mountain refuge, bringing with them their unique skills and knowledge. Their renewed unity created a sense of hope and strength that had been missing for too long. The day of their return was met with celebration and relief. It was a turning point in their collective journey. The ceaseless rain outside remained a constant reminder of the challenges they faced, but the internal rift had been healed. The refugees had learned an invaluable lesson about the power of unity and cooperation. They knew that together, they had a better chance of facing the ceaseless rain and rebuilding their lives. The path ahead was still uncertain, but they faced it with newfound determination, having weathered the storm within their own community. As the ceaseless rain continued its relentless fall, the mountain refuge stood as a testament to human resilience and the strength of unity. The turning point had come, and the survivors were more prepared than ever to confront the challenges of their uncertain future. Chapter 10: Reconciliation. The return of Victor's faction marked a significant step forward for the mountain refuge. It wasn't a seamless transition, as old wounds took time to heal, but the sense of unity and shared purpose had returned. The ceaseless rain outside continued to beat down on the mountains, but within the refuge, something beautiful was taking shape. Sophia's leadership and vision for the future had earned her the respect and admiration of the entire community. She continued to play a pivotal role in ensuring that everyone's talents and skills were put to good use. The artisans who had previously crafted tools and art in isolation were now collaborating with others, sharing their knowledge and ideas. This exchange of skills enriched the community and improved their quality of life. While the ceaseless rain had originally driven the survivors to the mountain refuge, it was their shared experiences and the bonds formed in the face of adversity that kept them there. They had become a family, a resilient and diverse group united by their will to survive and their acceptance of each other's differences. Sophia also worked tirelessly to improve the conditions within the refuge. The ceaseless rain had not only driven them from their homes, but had damaged the cave system over time. She initiated projects to reinforce their shelter, ensuring that it would withstand the relentless elements outside. The ceaseless rain, which had once been a harbinger of doom, was now viewed with a different perspective. It was a reminder of their shared history, a symbol of the strength they had discovered within themselves when faced with the harshest of challenges. The ceaseless rain had taught them that unity and cooperation were the keys to survival. As the days turned into weeks, and then months, the survivors began to explore the possibilities of their environment. While the ceaseless rain limited their excursions beyond the refuge, they started cultivating mushrooms for food and developed intricate water management systems. This allowed them to use the cave's unique features to their advantage, turning challenges into opportunities. Education also became a fundamental aspect of their community. The ceaseless rain couldn't stop them from passing on knowledge and wisdom to the younger generation. Children learned not only the basics of survival, but also the history and traditions of their people. The refuge had become more than just a sanctuary, it was a place where their culture and heritage thrived. While life in the refuge was far from perfect, it was a testament to human adaptability and resilience. The ceaseless rain had been the catalyst for their journey, but it was their determination and their ability to embrace change that had allowed them to thrive. They had not only weathered the storm but had emerged from it stronger and more united than ever before. The ceaseless rain continued outside, a constant reminder of the world they had left behind. It was a world of uncertainty and chaos, a world they hoped to return to one day. But for now, within the mountain refuge, they had found a sanctuary of hope and renewal. The ceaseless rain had shaped their destinies, and they were determined to make the most of it. Chapter 11: A Fragile Future. In the mountain refuge, hope had been rekindled, and the ceaseless rain became a backdrop to their evolving lives. A year had passed since Sophia and Victor's reconciliation, and the refuge was unrecognizable from its early days. What was once a survivalist haven had transformed into a community where life, culture, and learning flourished. The ceaseless rain remained an ever-present reminder of the world outside, but it no longer held the same dread. It had become a part of their existence, and they had learned to adapt. With newfound optimism, the survivors began to envision a future beyond the refuge, where the ceaseless rain was a distant memory. Sophia's council worked tirelessly, drafting plans for a possible return to the outside world. The ceaseless rain had forced them to become resourceful, and they were determined to use this newfound resilience to their advantage. The knowledge passed down through generations became the cornerstone of their survival. It was time to put this wisdom to use and face the ceaseless rain once more. Exploratory teams began venturing beyond the refuge's entrance, braving the ceaseless rain and assessing the state of the world outside. Their reports were cautiously optimistic. While the ceaseless rain had altered the landscape, they believed that humanity could endure its challenges. The ceaseless rain had not only ravaged the world but had also united those who remained. A collective desire to rebuild, to re-establish contact with scattered survivors, and to reclaim their heritage was born. Their journey was fraught with peril, but the ceaseless rain had taught them the value of persistence. Even within the refuge, the ceaseless rain was a reminder of the fragility of their existence. The ceaseless rain could not go on forever, and when it eventually ceased, they had to be ready to emerge from the shadows. While the ceaseless rain had reshaped their society, their identity remained intact, and they carried the ceaseless rain's lessons with them. As Sophia looked out at the ceaseless rain pouring down the mountainside, she couldn't help but feel a profound sense of responsibility. The ceaseless rain had shown them the worst of humanity's flaws, but it had also revealed their potential for greatness. They could overcome the ceaseless rain that had become both their tormentor and their teacher. The ceaseless rain had taught them that the world was ever-changing, and their ceaseless rain-tested unity was their greatest strength. Even in the face of relentless adversity, they had built a new society within the refuge, one based on compassion, knowledge, and resilience. They were determined to carry this ceaseless rain-forged spirit back into the world. As Sophia watched the ceaseless rain, she knew that the ceaseless rain would one day end, but their ceaseless rain-forged bonds would endure. The ceaseless rain would no longer be a ceaseless rain of despair, but a ceaseless rain of hope. They would face the ceaseless rain head-on and rebuild a future worthy of their ceaseless rain-tested resolve. With the ceaseless rain as their backdrop, the survivors prepared for their next ceaseless rain. They knew the ceaseless rain would be challenging, but it was a ceaseless rain they were now determined to face. The ceaseless rain had molded them into something ceaseless rain strong, and they would carry that ceaseless rain strength into an uncertain future. The ceaseless rain outside continued to fall, a ceaseless rain of change, of growth, of rebirth. It was a ceaseless rain they were eager to embrace, for it was a ceaseless rain they had learned to respect and, ultimately, conquer.